can't just walk in here and make these demands.
I am simply stating the facts, Mr. Harrison.
This is outrageous. I demand to speak to your manager.
Sir, I am the manager. How can I help you?
Have you ever walked into a place you built only to be told you didn't belong? Imagine the shock of being stripped of dignity, not because of what you've done, but because of how others see you. That's what happened to Dr. Amelia Richardson, a black CEO, humiliated and escorted out of her own bank by people who had no idea she owned the very walls around them. In that moment, Amelia faced a choice: break down quietly, or rise with a calm strength that would change not only her life, but the future of an entire industry. What would you have done if it were you, standing in her shoes, carrying generations of silent battles on your shoulders? This is more than a story of humiliation. It is a story of dignity reclaimed, of justice demanded, and of one woman who turned pain into power. Stay with me, because what Amelia did next shook boardrooms, rattled politicians, and reminded us all that respect is not optional, it's essential. If this story moves you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's step together into this journey. The marble lobby of Metropolitan Trust Bank had never been so silent. At 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the sound of polished shoes usually echoed against stone columns. Clerks shuffled paperwork, and customers lined up under chandeliers that sparkled with calculated restraint. But that day, the rhythm broke. Security guard Rodriguez had his hands lightly on the arm of a small black woman in a navy blazer. His grip was not rough, but the gesture was enough to make every bystander raise their phones. Someone whispered, "They're throwing her out." The woman did not resist. She did not argue. She smiled, just a faint curve of the lips, quiet and unsettling, and whispered 5 words. Those 5 words, barely louder than a breath, would soon ricochet across social media, ignite outrage, and eventually topple careers. For the moment, though, the crowd only saw the surface: a middle-aged black customer being shown the exit. She was 5'3", measured in calm posture and steady eyes. She moved with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't come from entitlement, but from history, from battles fought long before this room. Her name was Dr. Amelia Richardson. But no one here, not the branch manager, not the assistant, not even the guard holding her arm, knew it yet. At the center of it all stood Marcus Webb, the new branch manager. 28, 3 months on the job, eager to prove himself. His MBA hung framed in his office, the ink barely dry. From behind his mahogany desk, Webb crossed his arms and looked down at the woman with the kind of smirk that comes easy when you believe your authority is beyond question. "Ma'am," he said, voice raised just enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, "this is a private institution. You can't just walk in demanding things." Phones clicked. Screens lit up. It wasn't just a conversation anymore, it was a performance. Dr. Richardson kept her eyes on him, steady as stone. She placed her leather briefcase against the edge of his desk. It was the kind of briefcase built to last decades, stitched by hand, the smell of genuine leather lingering even in a room filled with perfume and floor polish. "I am here for routine business," she said evenly. Webb laughed, the kind of laugh that never reaches the eyes. "Routine business. Right. And I suppose you have an account here worth our attention." The words dropped heavy. Customers shifted uneasily. A woman near the door began recording. Rodriguez, 15 years in security, shifted his weight. Something about this customer was different. She wasn't loud. She wasn't aggressive. She wasn't desperate. She was calm, too calm. His instincts told him to step back, but Webb's orders were clear. By the teller stations, an assistant manager emerged, Lisa Chen, tablet in hand. Ambitious Careful, loyal to protocol. She glanced at Webb, then at the woman. Something about the navy blazer, the understated Cartier watch, the way she carried herself, it didn't fit the picture of a trespasser. Still, Webb was her supervisor. "Is there a problem here?" Lisa asked. "This woman claims she has business with us," Webb said, louder now, ensuring the lobby heard every syllable. No appointment, no documentation, just walked in demanding special treatment. The woman Amelia slipped a wallet from her purse, slowly, deliberately. For a brief second, the platinum shimmer of an American Express Centurion card caught the light. Then it was gone, tucked away as quickly as it had appeared. Webb missed it entirely. He pressed forward, voice sharper. "Ma'am, I'll ask you one more time to leave peacefully before we call the real police." Gasps moved through the crowd. A young woman in the corner whispered into her phone camera, Sarah Martinez, activist and live streamer. Her channel Justice Watch counted only a few hundred followers until now. Viewers jumped from 200 to 200 in under a minute. "Y'all are seeing this, right?" Sarah whispered. "This manager is out of line. He's treating her like a criminal just for standing here." Across the room, a man with a DSLR slung over his shoulder entered. Marcus Thompson, local blogger with 40,000 followers, instinctively sensed the heat of a breaking story. He lifted his phone, started recording, and murmured, "Folks, something's about to go down in this lobby." Meanwhile, Webb's confidence swelled. He mistook the silence of his audience for authority. "People like you come in here every day with complaints," he announced. "This isn't that kind of bank." The words "people like you" hung in the air like smoke. Every ear caught them. Every phone camera captured them. Sarah's live chat exploded with outrage. Comments poured in. "This is discrimination. This is insane. This is America, 2025, and it still happens." Still, Amelia's voice did not rise. "I haven't raised my voice once," she said quietly. "But your tone, your posture, those are aggressive." Her words sliced through the air not with volume, but with precision. For a second, Webb faltered. Then he tightened his jaw. "Security!" he ordered. "Remove her." Rodriguez hesitated. "Sir, she hasn't actually. She's trespassing." Webb cut him off. "Do your job." The cameras rolled. Phone streamed. The clock on the wall ticked closer to 2:50. And in the middle of it all, Amelia glanced at her watch. She seemed to be counting. Not nervously, not impatiently, but with purpose. "I'll give you exactly 2 more minutes," she said softly. Webb smirked, but his voice trembled just a hair. 2 minutes for what to call security on yourself. Her answer came not in words, but in the steady calm of someone who already knew the ending to a story everyone else thought they were writing. The lobby, the cameras, the whispers, all of it leaned in. Something was about to shift. The second hand on the lobby clock swept toward the top. 2:58 p.m. Every eye followed it as if the minute itself carried weight. In truth, it did. For Amelia, every tick was a reminder of preparation. For Webb, it was just another notch in his illusion of control. 2 minutes are up, Webb declared, voice sharp, echoing under marble arches. Security, now. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He'd seen scuffles, drunk customers, even robbery attempts, but never this. Never a woman so still, so deliberate. It wasn't fear, it was patience. His gut screamed this was wrong. Still, his paycheck depended on obeying orders. Phones hovered higher. Sarah's live stream comments scrolled in a blur. Stay strong. Don't let them push you. Who is she? Why is he acting like this? Viewers shot past 8,000. Screenshots were already sprinting through Twitter. Amelia reached into her purse again. The guard flinched slightly, but her hand emerged only with a sleek phone. Its black case bore tiny embossed initials, A.R. She tapped the screen, scrolled with calm purpose, and pressed a contact. The line rang once. A man's voice answered immediately. James. Her own voice was soft, but filled the lobby like a bell. Code 7. Metropolitan Trust, Downtown Branch. Effective immediately. She ended the call before anyone could respond. Silence spread like shock waves. Webb blinked, forcing a chuckle. Who exactly did you just call? Your lawyer, Amelia, slid the phone back into her purse. Someone who actually works here. Her words carried no heat, only certainty. Lisa Chen's tablet chimed in her hands. A notification. She glanced down and froze. Emergency Code 7, Downtown Branch. Do not escalate further. The sender, James Morrison, Regional Vice President. Her eyes darted back to Amelia, realization dawning like sunrise. Meanwhile, Webb pressed his own phone to his ear, murmuring rapidly, Corporate, yes, I need confirmation. No VIPs are scheduled today, no special appointments. This woman. He glanced at Amelia. No ID. She refuses to give her name. Amelia smiled faintly, like a teacher letting a student stumble through the wrong answer. You never asked for my name, she said quietly. The crowd caught it. A few customers nodded, whispering agreement. Sarah's chat roared, she's right. He never asked. He just assumed. 2:59 p.m. 1 minute. Webb's confidence cracked. He paced behind his desk, sweat beginning to beat at his temples. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Security will remove you if you don't leave now. Rodriguez shifted uneasily. He whispered to Lisa, She's not lying. Look at her. This isn't how liars act. Lisa's throat tightened. I know, she said under her breath. Then the sound, the marble lobby amplified, hurried footsteps like thunder. Heads turned toward the glass doors. Through the entrance strode James Morrison, Regional Vice President, 23 years at Metropolitan Trust. His silver tie was crooked, his breath uneven, his polished shoes carrying the dust of someone who had actually run across downtown. People in the lobby gasped. Executives did not run, not men like James Morrison. His eyes swept the room, landing instantly on Amelia. Relief and terror flickered across his face at once. Dr. Richardson, he said breathlessly. I am so incredibly sorry. The name dropped like a stone into water. Ripples of shock passed through the lobby. Sarah's voice cracked into her phone. Y'all heard that he just called her Dr. Richardson. Wait, did he say Richardson? Lisa's hands shook as she typed furiously into her database. The entry appeared. Her eyes widened. Her mouth went dry. Dr. Amelia Richardson, founder, CEO, board chair, 67% owner, Metropolitan Trust Bank. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The woman they were trying to throw out didn't just have an account. She owned the bank. Phones caught everything, the pale drain of Webb's face, the dawning horror in Lisa's eyes, the collective gasp from customers. Rodriguez stepped back instinctively, as if physical distance could erase his near mistake. Sarah's live stream chat exploded. Viewer count hit 15,000 and climbing. OMG, she owns it. The CEO, the founder. This man is done. Amelia didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at Webb with the same calm she had shown since the beginning. Dr. Richardson, Webb stammered. I didn't realize. And you still don't, Amelia replied gently. The words, sharp as glass. The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, This is history. Morrison stepped closer, his tone reverent, almost pleading. The board is waiting upstairs. Dr. Richardson, please allow me to escort you. Amelia nodded once. Then she glanced at Webb, her expression unreadable. Bring Mr. Webb. He should hear what happens next. Webb's knees nearly buckled. 3 months into his new career, his arrogance shattered in seconds. The elevator waited like judgment itself. At precisely 3:10 p.m., Amelia walked forward. The crowd parted. Phones captured every step. Her small frame, her steady hands, her unshaken calm carried more authority than marble columns or mahogany desks ever could. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. She stepped inside. Morrison followed, pale and sweating. Lisa entered hesitantly, clutching her tablet like a shield. Webb stumbled last, each step dragging the weight of humiliation. Sarah whispered into her phone camera, "Folks, we just saw a man try to kick the actual owner out of her own bank, and now she's headed upstairs to take control. This is not over." Her viewer count surged past $22,000. The elevator doors closed. The marble lobby exhaled. Customers stared at one another, whispering, tweeting, uploading clips. Outside, downtown traffic rolled on as if nothing had happened. But inside Metropolitan Trust, a corporate earthquake was moving floor by floor. Amelia stood quietly in the corner of the elevator. Her reflection in the brass panel showed the faint smile still on her lips. Not triumph, not revenge, just the calm of someone who knew this moment was not chance. It was preparation meeting arrogance. She folded her hands and lifted her gaze to the floor indicator. 12, 20, 30, climbing higher. Her thoughts were not on Webb or the crowd below. They were on what came next, the boardroom, the cameras, the reforms she had waited years to implement. Today, humiliation had tried to touch her. Instead, she would turn it into transformation. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Amelia whispered, not to Webb, not to Morrison, but to herself, "This is bigger than me." The elevator glided upward, smooth and silent, carrying 4 very different heartbeats. Amelia's pulse was calm, measured. Morrison's thudded with dread. Lisa's raced with anxious self-doubt. Webb's pounded in raw panic. The brass numbers above the door ticked past the 40th floor. By the time they reached 47, the future of Metropolitan Trust would already be reshaped. The doors opened with a soft chime. A wave of chilled air rolled in, scented with polished wood and leather. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, the late afternoon sun spilling across a mahogany conference table where 12 board members sat flipping through quarterly reports. Conversation halted as Morrison entered, sweat at his temples, tie askew, face pale. Behind him trailed Lisa, clutching her tablet, Webb stumbling like a man headed for sentencing, and Amelia Richardson, who walked with the unhurried grace of inevitability. Board Chair Robert Sterling, 71, silver hair sharp against a navy suit, looked up in confusion. "James, is everything all right?" Morrison straightened his jacket, trying to mask his breathlessness. His voice carried the gravity of protocol. "Mr. Chairman, we have a Code 7 situation." The room fell into a stunned hush. Code 7 meant immediate legal risk, public exposure, reputational danger. It was the phrase no executive ever wanted to hear. Sterling's gaze moved to Amelia. Recognition flickered. Then confusion. Why would the founder herself be tied to a Code 7 Amelia? He asked carefully. "What's happened?" Amelia didn't sit. She placed her briefcase gently on the polished table, opened it, and drew out a tablet. Her movements were measured, precise, like a surgeon preparing instruments. "Good afternoon," she said evenly. "I apologize for the disruption, but we must address an incident that occurred downstairs not 40 minutes ago." A few board members exchanged puzzled glances. Dr. Patricia Williams, the only other black member of the board, leaned forward. She sensed the weight in Amelia's tone. Amelia tapped the tablet. The room's main screen lit up with shaky cell phone footage. Webb's voice filled the boardroom like poison. People like you come in here every day with complaints. Several board members winced. Another clip rolled, Webb ordering Rodriguez to remove Amelia, declaring she had no account, no right to be in the lobby. Then Morrison burst onto the scene in the footage, breathless, addressing her as Dr. Richardson. The moment of recognition, the silence that followed. The video froze on Webb's face, panic dawning, authority crumbling. Amelia turned to face the board. This footage was streamed live. It reached 47,000 viewers before I walked into this room. Screenshots are trending on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. The phrase banking while black is now a national topic, and our brand is at the center. Sarah Kim, communications strategist, looked physically ill. Dear God, the PR fallout. It is already catastrophic, Amelia said. But catastrophe is not the point. Accountability is. She let the silence stretch. The board members shifted in their seats, absorbing not just her words, but her composure. Finally, she turned her gaze on Webb. Mr. Webb, would you like to explain your actions to the board? Webb's mouth opened, closed. A soundless gasp. I made a mistake, he stammered. Amelia's voice was gentle but unrelenting. What mistake? I didn't recognize you. Amelia's eyebrow lifted a fraction. Try again. The silence pressed harder. Board members waited. Sterling leaned forward, his tone low. Mr. Webb, answer the question. Webb's hand shook. His voice cracked. I made assumptions based on what Amelia asked. He swallowed, eyes darting to the carpet. He could not say it, but everyone knew. Dr. Williams broke the tension. Mr. Webb, are you telling us that you judged Dr. Richardson did not belong in her own bank because of her race? Webb's silence was answer enough. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Webb's career was already ashes, but Amelia pressed not for vengeance, only truth. She clicked to the next slide. Policy documents appeared, her own handwriting highlighted in margins from years ago. Our corporate charter, which I personally drafted, includes zero tolerance for discrimination. Policy 847 outlines mandatory respect in all customer interactions. Today, those protocols were ignored. General Counsel Marcus Reed scribbled frantic notes, legal implications flashing like red sirens in his mind. Civil rights violations, federal scrutiny, lawsuits. But I am not here to bury careers. Amelia continued, voice steady. I am here to ensure this never happens again. The next slide displayed bold letters, the Amelia Protocol. Gasps murmured across the table. She outlined it with the same calm she'd shown in the lobby. Comprehensive reforms, mandatory bias training, monthly diversity audits, AI-assisted monitoring of customer interactions, independent oversight panels. This is not damage control, she said. This is structural change. Our survival depends on it. Our integrity demands it. Board member Thompson raised his hand hesitantly. And what about Mr. Webb? Amelia faced him squarely. Mr. Webb has a choice. Resignation effective immediately with severance or termination for cause with no benefits. Webb's shoulders sagged. He whispered, I'll resign. Her gaze softened slightly. Mr. Webb, I believe you're sorry you were caught. Whether you're sorry for your actions, that remains to be seen. Lisa Chen shifted nervously. Amelia turned toward her. Ms. Chen, you followed protocol but allowed bias to guide your judgment. You will undergo intensive training and a 6-month probation. I believe you can learn. Lisa's eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Amelia closed the presentation. The question now is whether this board has the courage to lead. I am asking for full approval of these reforms, implementation within 30 days, and a public statement affirming equality for every customer. Sterling looked around the table. The weight of his years pressed on him. He had mentored Amelia once, decades ago, when she was a fiery young banker with ideas larger than her office. Now, she stood before him as the institution's conscience. All in favor, he said quietly. Hands lifted, one after another. Unanimous? Amelia nodded once. Not triumph, not relief. Just resolve. Then let's begin, she said. The boardroom felt transformed, not by anger, but by clarity. What had started as humiliation in a marble lobby had become a blueprint for systemic reform. And somewhere deep inside, even Webb knew history had just shifted, and he had played the fool in its opening act. The boardroom emptied slowly, each member leaving with the weight of Amelia's words still pressing on their shoulders. The polished doors shut behind them, but their murmurs echoed down the hallways. Only Amelia, Morrison, Sterling, and General Counsel Marcus Reed remained. The tablet still glowed faintly on the table, paused on the phrase, "The Amelia Protocol." Sterling exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. 47,000 viewers in less than an hour. By tonight, that number could triple. We don't have days to control this, maybe not even hours. Amelia folded her arms gently, her voice calm but firm. We don't need to control it. We need to face it. Morrison glanced at his own device. Notifications spilled in by the dozen calls from corporate communications, urgent messages from regional managers, emails from reporters already sniffing at the story. CNN just called our PR desk, he said, his voice tight. The Business Bureau wants a statement. Then they'll get one. Amelia replied, but not a denial, not a half-hearted apology. They'll get the truth. And a plan. Sterling studied her. This isn't damage control to you, is it? Her gaze held steady. It's justice and opportunity. Meanwhile, in the lobby below, the aftershock still reverberated. Customers clustered in small groups, whispering, replaying clips on their phones. Some had already uploaded their videos, their captions sharp and biting. Bank manager humiliates black woman. Turns out she owns the bank. Sarah Martinez, still streaming to an audience that had now swelled past 25,000, held her phone high. Folks, what we just witnessed is history. I've covered protests, discrimination cases, viral scandals, but nothing like this. The arrogance, the assumptions he tried to throw the CEO out of her own bank. And now she's upstairs rewriting the rules. Her comment section blazed with outrage and admiration. She's a queen, respect personified. This is what power with dignity looks like. Marcus Thompson, his DSLR hanging at his side, typed furiously on his phone. His first post had already been shared 5,000 times. By the time he finished his follow-up thread, Breaking Bank manager tries to remove customer. Plot twist, she's the founder and majority shareholder. Board is in emergency session right now. His notifications were a blur. Rodriguez, standing quietly by the glass doors, shook his head. He'd seen trouble before, but never like this. His body remembered the sensation of gripping Amelia's arm. He released it the moment Morrison burst in, but the shame lingered. She hadn't fought, hadn't cursed, hadn't raised her voice. She had let the moment collapse under its own weight, and he had almost been the instrument of her humiliation. He whispered to himself, never again. Upstairs. Amelia was already dictating next steps. Morrison took notes as she spoke. We issue a statement within the hour. It must acknowledge the incident, not minimize it. We admit failure, and we present the reforms. We use the phrase, the Amelia Protocol. If we don't name it, the media will. Better we own it. Sterling's brow furrowed. It feels aggressive, naming it after yourself. She met his gaze. What happened downstairs was personal. What we do next is systemic. Attaching my name ensures no one can quietly bury this when the storm passes. It makes me accountable. It makes us accountable. Silence followed. Then Reed, the lawyer, nodded slowly. She's right. If it's branded, it's permanent. It forces consistency. The plan moved quickly. Press teams drafted statements. IT departments prepared to push banners onto the bank's website. Compliance officers outlined audit structures. By 6 p.m., Amelia planned to stand in front of cameras for a press conference that would stream live across major networks. But even as corporate machinery roared into motion, the human side of the fallout played out in quieter corners. Lisa Chen sat alone in her office, tablet in her lap, the reality of her probationary sentence replaying in her mind. Amelia's words echoed, "You followed protocol, but allowed bias to guide your judgment." She knew it was true. She hadn't called Amelia names, hadn't mocked her. But she had looked at her blazer, her skin, her calm insistence, and assumed Webb was right. Her chest tightened. How many times have I let that happen before, she whispered. She didn't know, and that ignorance haunted her. Down the hall, Webb sat slumped at a small table, HR forms in front of him. His resignation letter looked thin, meaningless compared to the avalanche of headlines already forming. He thought of his student loans, his family's pride in his MBA, the 3 months of confidence that had crumbled in less than 30 minutes. He pressed his palms to his face. The words rang in his ears. People like you. He hadn't even realized he'd said them out loud until the crowd gasped. Now those 3 words were replaying across thousands of screens, immortalized in shaky footage and angry tweets. I didn't mean it like that, he muttered. But meaning didn't matter anymore. Impact did. Amelia, meanwhile, stood alone by the window of the executive floor. The city spread out beneath her, cars weaving through intersections, oblivious to the storm unfolding 47 stories above. She thought not of Webb, not of his failure, but of the millions of customers her institution served. Her own memory tugged at her the first time she walked into a bank as a young graduate, eager to open an account, only to be told she needed someone responsible to co-sign. She remembered the humiliation, the burn of being underestimated. That burn had never fully left. Now, decades later, she had the chance to rewrite the story not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed, doubted, or disrespected. Morrison approached quietly. Dr. Richardson, the press is waiting. Local networks are already outside. Amelia nodded. She turned from the window, her posture steady, her eyes clear. Then let's go. The elevators carried her down once again, but this time the weight in the air was different. Before she had been underestimated, now she was undeniable. The lobby buzzed as she stepped out. Customers parted instinctively, phones rising once more. Sarah's stream refocused, her voice trembling with excitement. Y'all, here she comes, Dr. Richardson, the woman they tried to throw out. She's about to speak. Amelia paused at the center of the lobby, Rodriguez standing respectfully nearby. For a moment, she looked at the marble floor, the chandeliers above, the glass doors that had almost closed on her. Then she looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the world watching through digital screens. I was underestimated today, she began, voice carrying without strain. I was told I didn't belong in my own institution. Many of you have felt that same sting in banks, in stores, in offices. You know what it is to be dismissed because of how you look. Today, we change that. Her words flowed like water, calm but cutting, every syllable striking deeper than anger ever could. This is not about one manager or one mistake. This is about a culture we must transform. That is why, effective immediately. We are implementing what I call the Amelia Protocol. It means mandatory bias training. It means audits of every branch. It means respect, documented and enforced. It means no one will ever again be treated as less inside these walls. The lobby was silent, except for the click of cameras and the rush of Sarah's chat exploding across the internet. Amelia concluded softly. Sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is not anger. It is proof. Proof that dignity is stronger than arrogance. Proof that respect is not optional, it is required. Applause broke, hesitant at first, then building until the marble columns rang with it. Even Rodriguez clapped, his palms rough against each other, his eyes wet. And across the world, clips of her speech began to circulate. Headlines lit up. Black CEO humiliated in her own bank turns moment into reform. The Amelia Protocol. A new era of accountability. For some, it was scandal. For many, it was inspiration. For Amelia, it was only the beginning. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, the story had already leapt beyond the marble walls of Metropolitan Trust Bank. Clips of Amelia's speech cascaded across social media, each platform remixing the moment into its own rhythm. On Twitter, the hashtag #JarksAmeliaProtocol surged to #1 by nightfall. TikTok flooded with quick edits. Web-sneering people like you cut against Amelia's calm reply. You never asked for my name. Instagram Reels showed her standing steady in the lobby, the crowd parting like water around her. On YouTube, Sarah Martinez uploaded the full live stream. Within 2 hours, it passed 1 million views. The title screamed, "They tried to kick out a black woman from a bank." She owned the bank. News anchors scrambled to catch up. By 8 p.m., CNN was running a segment titled Humiliation or History. The Amelia Richardson incident. Clips rolled back to back with panelists weighing in. Was this corporate negligence, implicit bias, or systemic racism laid bare for Amelia? The noise was background. She sat quietly in her office at headquarters, sipping lukewarm coffee, scrolling headlines without expression. Each one confirmed what she already knew: the story was unstoppable. Morrison entered, holding 2 phones and a stack of printouts. Dr. Richardson, every major outlet wants a live interview. CNN, MSNBC, even Fox Business. They want you tonight. She shook her head. Not tonight, not rushed, tomorrow morning. And we'd do it on our terms. What terms? Morrison asked. She tapped the tablet on her desk. A draft of her speech glowed softly. We don't let them frame this as scandal. We frame it as reform, not humiliation, but leadership. If we stay reactive, we lose control. If we stay proactive, we shape the future. Morrison studied her for a moment. You're turning a PR crisis into a movement. She gave a faint smile. No, James. I'm revealing that the movement was already here. We're just giving it a name. Across town. Webb sat in his 1-bedroom apartment, blinds drawn, laptop screen glaring. His resignation email was already viral, leaked by someone inside HR. His phone buzzed with texts he refused to answer. Marcus, what happened? Is it true? His mother's voicemail cracked with confusion and shame. He replayed the clip of himself, saying the words, "People like you." He muted it, but the shape of his mouth saying the phrase was enough to send his stomach twisting. Every rewatch made it worse. It didn't matter what he meant. Those words belonged to the internet now, and the internet didn't forgive. He dropped his head into his hands. 3 months in, and his career was over. Meanwhile, Lisa Chen sat cross-legged on her couch, tablet open to Metropolitan Trust's intranet portal. She scrolled through the internal announcement Amelia had issued. Mandatory training begins Monday. Probationary reviews every quarter. Independent oversight committees to be appointed within 30 days. Her probation notice was attached. She read it again and again, not as punishment, but as a mirror. She remembered Amelia's voice. You followed protocol, but allowed bias to guide your judgment. Tears pricked her eyes. She wanted to be better. She wanted to prove Amelia's faith wasn't misplaced. For the first time, probation felt like grace. Rodriguez sat at his kitchen table, his wife across from him, his young daughter asleep upstairs. He admitted quietly, I almost dragged her out. I almost humiliated the woman who signs my checks. His wife touched his hand. But you didn't. I hesitated. He said, that's not enough. Next time, I can't hesitate. I have to choose right before the wrong even starts. That night, he opened an old notebook he hadn't touched since his academy days and began jotting notes. What bias looks like. How to resist pressure. How to see people, not assumptions. And in a small apartment across the river, Sarah Martinez couldn't stop watching her notifications. Her channel had grown overnight from hundreds to hundreds of thousands. Donations poured in. Major outlets requested permission to use her footage. She whispered to herself, we've been shouting for years, and nobody listened. Then she shows up calm as stone, and the world finally sees for her. Amelia was proof. Proof that dignity could break through noise. Proof that the fight for justice wasn't just about anger, it was also about presence. By morning, Amelia's face was everywhere. Editorials hailed her as a symbol of resilience. Some skeptics dismissed it as performative corporate theater, but even their cynicism amplified the story. At 9 a.m., Amelia walked onto the set of Good Morning America. The lights glared, the host leaned forward, and millions of viewers leaned with them. Dr. Richardson, the host began. Yesterday, the world watched as you were nearly thrown out of your own bank. Most people would have reacted with anger. You stayed calm. Why Amelia folded her hands in her lap? Because anger wasn't the point. Dignity was. The host nodded, clearly moved. And what do you want people to take away from this moment? That respect is not negotiable, Amelia said. It is the foundation of trust. And without trust, there is no banking, no business, no society worth building. Clips of her interview exploded across platforms within minutes. Hashtags multiplied. Celebrities retweeted her words. Politicians weighed in, some praising her courage, others twisting the narrative for their own agendas. By noon, Metropolitan Trust stock dipped 5 points, then rebounded as analysts praised Amelia's decisive reforms. The market, like the public, was holding its breath. In her office, Amelia read messages pouring in. Thousands of customers wrote stories of their own humiliations in banks, grocery stores, workplaces. She read them quietly, heart heavy but steady. She whispered to herself, this isn't just about me. It never was. By late evening, she stood again at headquarters, cameras waiting for her formal press conference. This time, she was not speaking to a lobby full of strangers. She was speaking to the world, her words carried across airwaves, through cables, into living rooms. Yesterday, I was underestimated in the very institution I built. But this is not about one moment. It is about the millions who have been underestimated, disrespected, or dismissed. Today, we declare that change is not optional, it is required. The Amelia Protocol is not a slogan, it is a promise. She paused, scanning the cameras as though meeting every viewer's eye. And to anyone who has ever been told they do not belong, you do. You always have. And you always will. The applause was not just in the room. It was digital, global, echoing in hearts far beyond the bank's walls. For Amelia, this was not vindication, it was responsibility. The wildfire had begun. Now, she would have to shepherd it into something lasting, something larger than a scandal, something closer to justice. The morning after Amelia's press conference, the city's financial district pulsed with a strange mixture of tension and awe. Commuters clutching coffee cups murmured about the viral clips. Taxi drivers replayed her words on morning radio. Inside corporate towers, executives watched with both admiration and dread. Metropolitan Trust headquarters buzzed like a beehive. Staffers whispered in hallways. Emails flew faster than they could be answered. And the usually stoic investor relations team found themselves fielding calls, not just from Wall Street analysts, but from everyday customers who had never once bothered to speak to a corporate office. James Morrison arrived in Amelia's office carrying a thick folder. His tie was neatly knotted this time, but his eyes carried the exhaustion of 2 sleepless nights. "Dr. Richardson," he said, laying the file on her desk. "Congressional staffers reached out this morning. The Banking Oversight Committee wants to open hearings. They want you to testify." Amelia glanced at the folder but didn't touch it. Of course they do. They smell reform and they smell votes. They'll want to make a spectacle of this. Morrison lowered his voice. "Some on the Hill will try to twist it. They'll claim this is overreach, that you're politicizing bias." Amelia looked out the window, her eyes sweeping across the skyline. If they want a spectacle, let's give them something they didn't expect. Honesty. Meanwhile, in another corner of the city, Marcus Webb sat slouched in a dim cafe, a cap pulled low over his face. His name had become poison in corporate circles. HR recruiters whispered to each other, "Don't touch him. PR nightmare." His inbox filled with rejections. He scrolled through the endless online commentary, memes of his sneer, his phrase, "people like you," plastered onto satirical captions. Some users mocked him viciously. Others dissected his words with academic precision. His reputation wasn't just damaged, it was annihilated. For the first time, he felt the weight of what Amelia had said. "I believe you're sorry you were caught. Whether you're sorry for your actions, that remains to be seen." The words echoed, nagging, digging deeper than any online ridicule. For once, he asked himself, not how do I get out of this, but why did I ever think like that in the first place? Lisa Chen, in contrast, walked through headquarters with a new gravity in her step. Employees looked at her differently now, some with pity, some with judgment. But she embraced the weight of her probation. She had started keeping a journal, recording every moment where bias might creep in her assumptions about customers, her snap judgments of colleagues, even the tone of her emails. It wasn't punishment anymore, it was practice. Downstairs in the security office, Rodriguez adjusted his uniform. His supervisor clapped him on the back. "Tough week." "Huh," Rodriguez nodded. "The toughest, but maybe the most important." That night, he sat at his kitchen table again, drafting ideas for a training module of his own. He imagined standing in front of a room full of younger guards, telling them what he had almost done dragging out a woman who owned the building above his head. He pictured himself saying, "If you hesitate, it might save a life. If you pause, you might see the truth." While these private reckonings unfolded, the public stage grew louder. Politicians seized the moment. Some praised Amelia's leadership. Senator Diane Kelly tweeted, "Dr. Richardson showed the world what dignity under pressure looks like. The Amelia Protocol should be a model nationwide." Others pushed back. Congressman Mark Halstead posted, "This is corporate theater, nothing more. America doesn't need CEOs making racial policy in boardrooms. We need law and order, not hashtags." Cable news networks turned the story into a nightly battlefield. One panel hailed Amelia as a modern Rosa Parks of finance. Another accused her of leveraging identity for power. Every word, every clip, every pause was dissected. Inside headquarters, Amelia gathered her senior team late one evening. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of city lights through the windows. "We cannot control what people say about us," she told them. "We cannot stop politicians from twisting this moment, but what we can control is what we do. Real reform, not slogans." Morrison leaned forward. "The board is nervous. Stock prices recovered yesterday, but volatility is real. Investors want reassurance." "Then give them reassurance," Amelia said. "But let them understand this isn't just risk mitigation, it's growth. A bank that stands for dignity will earn loyalty money can't buy." General Counsel Marcus Reed cleared his throat. "Dr. Richardson, I need to warn you. If we put these reforms into place and tie them to every branch, lawsuits will come. Some employees will claim wrongful termination. Some customers will sue if they think they've been treated unfairly under our new protocols." Amelia's gaze didn't waver. "Good. Let them. I'd rather fight lawsuits for doing the right thing than spend another decade settling cases for doing nothing." The room went quiet. Morrison scribbled the phrase in his notes. He knew those words would end up in headlines. Later that week, Amelia appeared before the Congressional Banking Oversight Committee. The chamber buzzed with cameras, journalists, aides scribbling furiously. She sat alone at the witness table, a small placard reading Dr. Amelia Richardson, founder and CEO, Metropolitan Trust Bank. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters shouted questions. She answered none until the gavel fell. Chairman Robert Sterling, her mentor, now turned impartial authority, leaned toward his microphone. "Dr. Richardson, thank you for coming. Please explain to this committee what happened at your bank." Amelia adjusted her papers, then spoke. Her voice calm, deliberate, every word measured. "What happened at my bank," she said, "happens in banks, in stores, in schools, in airports across this country, every day. I was underestimated because of what I looked like. I was dismissed because of assumptions. The difference is, I had the power to stop it. Millions of Americans do not. That is why I am here." A ripple of silence swept the chamber. Even Halstead, poised to pounce, paused. She continued, "You may call it corporate policy. I call it basic respect. You may call it political. I call it survival. If the institutions we trust to hold our money, our livelihoods, cannot respect us equally, then we have no trust at all." The hearing stretched for hours, lawmakers grilling her on policy details, cost projections, legal risks. Amelia answered each calmly, without theatrics. She didn't shout. She didn't perform. She embodied the very principle she demanded: dignity. When it ended, headlines lit up once more. Richardson stuns Congress with calm defiance. Amelia Protocol sparks national debate. CEO or civil rights leader. That night, in the quiet of her home, Amelia sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city glowed below, alive with noise, but inside there was silence. She thought of the girl she once was, turned away at a bank counter, told she needed someone responsible to co-sign. She thought of Webb, broken by his arrogance. She thought of Lisa, scribbling in her journal. She thought of Rodriguez, writing training notes. And she thought of the millions watching, waiting to see if this moment was a flicker or a flame. Her whisper was barely audible, but it carried the weight of her life's work. "We will make it a flame." The weeks following Amelia's congressional testimony were a whirlwind of press, policy, and pressure. Every headline seemed to include her name. Every news anchor seemed to have an opinion. Some called her the future of banking. Others painted her as a disruptor, willing to tear down tradition. Inside her private life, however, the noise was harder to quiet. Late at night, in the silence of her apartment, She often sat awake, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside, but in her mind, echoes lingered: the sneer in Webb's voice, the cameras flashing as security dragged her toward the exit, the humiliation that had almost broken her. She replayed it, not because she wanted to relive it, but because she needed to remember the sting. If she ever lost touch with that pain, the reforms would lose their urgency. One evening, her closest friend, Evelyn Carter, a professor of sociology, visited. Evelyn watched Amelia stir her tea without drinking. "You're carrying the whole weight of this on your shoulders," Evelyn said gently. "Do you even realize how tired you look?" Amelia smiled faintly. "Tired is the price of change, but you're not just fighting for policy. Amelia, you're fighting ghosts, every insult, every dismissal you've ever swallowed. If you don't release some of it, it'll consume you." Amelia's eyes softened. She thought of her childhood, her mother lecturing her at the kitchen table. "Don't let them see you break. Don't let them know you're tired. If you stay calm, you win twice." She whispered the words, and Evelyn's eyes filled with sympathy. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb spiraled deeper. The cafe where he once hid became his daily haunt. His laptop open, job applications flying out into the void. His bank account dwindled. Former colleagues ignored his calls. His own parents asked him why he couldn't just say sorry and move on. But Webb had discovered that apologies without transformation were worthless. The world didn't want his excuses. The world wanted him to admit his own blindness. One night, after too much whiskey, he opened his laptop and started typing not applications, but reflections. He wrote about his upbringing, about the invisible privileges he'd never questioned, about the quick judgments he'd made, not just of Amelia, but of countless others. By dawn, he had written 12 pages. It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. Lisa Chen, on the other hand, began to change in quieter ways. During her probation, she sought out mentorship with Maria Gonzalez, the newly promoted branch manager. Maria had seen discrimination from both sides, sometimes as the overlooked employee, sometimes as the authority figure. "Lisa," Maria told her, "you made mistakes, but you didn't double down. You stopped and listened. That's rare. Use it." Lisa started keeping a habit every time she felt an assumption rising in her mind. She paused and wrote it down. Sometimes it was about a customer's accent, sometimes about a colleague's tone, sometimes about her own insecurities. Seeing the assumptions on paper stripped them of power. She began sharing this practice with others in small team meetings. To her surprise, colleagues embraced it. They laughed at themselves, admitted biases, and learned from each other. Lisa found her voice not as a defender of the old system, but as a quiet reformer inside it. Rodriguez, too, was transforming. He stood in front of a room full of new recruits one morning, his security badge gleaming under fluorescent lights. "You're here to keep people safe," he told them. "But never forget safe doesn't just mean bodies. It means dignity. If you strip someone's dignity, you've already failed." The recruits nodded, some taking notes, others just staring. But Rodriguez could tell the words were sinking in. He wasn't just guarding doors anymore. He was guarding humanity. For Amelia, the external battles raged on. Financial analysts pressed her with endless questions. What's the cost of these reforms? Will shareholders revolt? Will customers accept new protocols? She answered with the same calm persistence. This is not charity. This is business. Dignity creates loyalty. Loyalty creates growth. But inside, she battled fatigue. During one particularly long board session, her vision blurred. Her hands trembled slightly. She excused herself to the restroom, locked the door, and leaned heavily on the sink. "Is this worth it?" she asked herself. "Will they ever see me as more than a symbol? She closed her eyes and pictured the faces of customers she had met since the reforms began, an elderly black man who shook her hand with tears in his eyes, a young Latina entrepreneur who had opened her first account at Metropolitan Trust because she felt safe there, a mother who said her daughter watched Amelia's testimony and decided to apply to business school. Those faces answered her question. Yes, it was worth it. The pressure reached its peak when a national television network invited her to a live debate with Congressman Halstead. The studio lights were blinding. The cameras zoomed in. Halstead wasted no time. "This is corporate overreach," he declared. "This so-called protocol is nothing but political correctness run amok. Banks should manage money, not morals." The moderator turned to Amelia. "Dr. Richardson, how do you respond?" Amelia's voice was steady. "Congressman, if money and morals can't coexist, then what kind of country are we running banks exist because people trust them with their livelihoods? If that trust is poisoned by bias, then the money means nothing." Halstead scoffed, but the audience applauded. The clip went viral again. That night, back home, Amelia collapsed into her armchair. Exhausted but resolute, she whispered to herself, "You can bend, but you won't break." The next morning, a package arrived at her office. Inside was a printed essay with a shaky handwritten note. "Dr. Richardson, I know I hurt you. I hurt a lot of people. I'm trying to understand why. I'm trying to be better. Please accept this as proof I'm not hiding anymore. Marcus Webb." Amelia read the essay in silence. Webb's words were clumsy, full of guilt and confession, but also honest. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She placed the essay in her desk drawer. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first sign of real accountability. As weeks turned into months, the reforms continued rolling out. The Amelia Protocol was no longer just a policy, it was a living practice, reshaping an entire culture. Employees began to take pride in it, not as a burden, but as a badge of honor. Customers noticed, communities noticed, and Amelia, though weary, began to see the tide turning not just in her bank, but in herself. By early spring, the ripple effect of Amelia's reforms had become a tidal wave across the financial industry. The Amelia Protocol was no longer a buzzword confined to Metropolitan Trust. It had become a reference point in boardrooms, business schools, and government reports. National newspapers ran front-page stories, "Bank CEO turns humiliation into reform." Magazines featured her on glossy covers under headlines like "The Woman Who Made Wall Street Blink." The narrative was irresistible. A black woman underestimated in her own bank had turned disgrace into systemic change. But for every cheerleader, there was an opponent. In a skyscraper across town, executives at rival banks held closed-door meetings. Charts lit up screens, showing customer migration away from them and toward Metropolitan Trust. Minority-owned businesses, young entrepreneurs, and socially conscious investors were opening accounts in droves with Amelia's institution. One competitor CEO slammed his hand on the mahogany table. "She's turned morality into a business model, and damn it, it's working." Meanwhile, inside Metropolitan Trust headquarters, Amelia sat at a long table with James Morrison, General Counsel Marcus Reed, and Board Chair Robert Sterling. Charts and reports spread across the polished surface. Morrison tapped a document. Customer satisfaction up 22%. Minority-owned business accounts nearly doubled in 6 months. "Our share price rose 14% after your congressional testimony." Sterling leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Amelia, you realize what this means? We're not just repairing reputation, we're redefining the industry." Amelia's face remained calm, but her mind raced. Success was dangerous in its own way. The higher they climbed, the harder rivals would try to knock them down. Across the country, critics mobilized. Trade groups warned that bias protocols were inefficient. Some conservative think tanks published articles calling Metropolitan Trust the woke bank. On cable news, pundits argued that Amelia was corporatizing activism. Amelia refused to engage in shouting matches. She didn't fight culture wars with sound bites. Instead, she leaned on numbers, stories, and lived experiences. At a major financial summit in Chicago, she stood before 1,000 executives. The room was a sea of dark suits, almost all men. She spoke without slides, without flashy charts. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we all know banking is about trust. If bias erodes that trust, then the numbers in your ledgers are meaningless. You can dismiss this as politics. I call it survival. The choice is yours. Wait until lawsuits force your hand, or change before the storm hits you." The hall fell silent. Even those who disagreed couldn't deny the clarity in her words. Back in New York, Marcus Webb watched the speech live stream on his laptop. He hadn't shaved in days. The essay he had written still lingered in Amelia's desk drawer, unanswered. But as he watched her command the stage, he realized something unsettling. She wasn't just addressing bankers. She was addressing him. Every excuse he had leaned on, every defense he had clung to, crumbled under her quiet authority. For Lisa Chen, the reforms created both challenge and opportunity. She was tasked with helping oversee bias detection technology across regional branches. The algorithm flagged conversations that carried discriminatory patterns, condescending tones, repeated dismissal, coded language. Some employees resisted fiercely, claiming robots can't judge tone. One heated staff meeting nearly boiled over. A veteran manager slammed his folder shut. "This is ridiculous. I've been in banking 30 years. I know how to talk to people." Lisa took a breath. Her voice trembled slightly but grew stronger as she spoke. "I thought I knew too. Until I realized I was enabling harm without even seeing it. This system isn't here to punish you. It's here to protect customers and protect us from our blind spots." The room quieted. For the first time, Lisa felt not just like a probationary assistant manager, but like a leader. Rodriguez was also stepping into leadership. His training sessions for new security officers became so popular that employees from other branches asked to attend. He told stories, not statistics, not protocols, but moments of hesitation, fear, and choice. "One day," he said, "I almost dragged out a woman for existing. That woman turned out to own the bank. That day taught me something. If your orders feel wrong, trust your gut." Protecting people doesn't mean following every command. It means respecting every human being who walks through those doors. The recruits listened, riveted. Rodriguez's honesty carried more weight than any textbook. Yet, the corporate earthquake wasn't just internal. Lawmakers began drafting bills inspired by Amelia's reforms. Hearings buzzed with debate about whether anti-bias standards should become mandatory for federally regulated banks. The White House invited Amelia to a roundtable on financial equity. Her presence drew cameras, but her words drew silence. The goal isn't to punish banks. The goal is to rebuild trust. Because when citizens don't trust institutions, democracy itself is weakened. Not everyone was impressed. Congressman Halstead continued his campaign of opposition. He gave fiery speeches warning of bureaucratic overreach. But each time he ranted, clips of Amelia's calm rebuttals circulated online, gaining millions of views. The public sided with her more often than not. On social media, the phrase dignity dividend began trending, a term coined by a blogger to describe how respect translated into loyalty and profits. Customers posted testimonials. "I moved my account to Metropolitan Trust because they see me." Finally, A bank where my accent doesn't make me invisible. Meanwhile, Webb's journey twisted further. He began attending local support groups for professionals who had been canceled. At first, he went to defend himself, but listening to others, some defiant, some humbled, he started to hear echoes of his own arrogance. He realized that redemption required more than survival. It required service. He began volunteering at a community literacy center, tutoring immigrants who struggled with English banking forms. At first, they eyed him with suspicion, but over time, they warmed. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was now helping the very people he once dismissed. Back at headquarters, Amelia faced her own doubts. One evening, after a long day of calls with regulators and investors, she sat in her office long after dark. The skyline twinkled, but her desk felt heavy. Evelyn Carter entered quietly. Still here, Amelia looked up, exhausted. Every step forward feels like 2 steps into a storm. Evelyn smiled softly. Storms wash away what's weak. What's left standing is strong. Amelia leaned back, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Then we'd better stand tall." The earthquake she had triggered was still shaking the industry. Rivals scrambled to adapt. Critics sharpened their attacks. Politicians calculated their gains. But underneath the noise, something undeniable was happening. Ordinary people were beginning to expect dignity as a standard, not a privilege. That expectation was the true tremor, and Amelia knew it was only the beginning. By early summer, Metropolitan Trust's downtown branch felt like a different place entirely. The marble floors were the same, the chandeliers still shimmered in the lobby, but the atmosphere had shifted. Customers entered with expectation, not suspicion. Employees greeted them with confidence that radiated from new training and a cultural reset. The Amelia Protocol was no longer a memo. It was a living rhythm. On a warm Tuesday morning, Amelia walked through the lobby unannounced. She carried no entourage, no cameras, just her calm, measured steps. Staff members noticed her instantly, but rather than stiffen with fear, they smiled. Maria Gonzalez approached, handing her the latest diversity metrics on a tablet. Complaints down 70%. Maria said proudly, "Customer compliments up nearly double. We've got people coming from other banks just because they heard about us." Amelia nodded. "It's working." But her eyes lingered on the small things, a teller leaning down to patiently help an elderly customer fill out forms, a security guard gently guiding a confused tourist, employees switching seamlessly into Spanish, Mandarin, and Tagalog. These weren't statistics, they were proof. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb was navigating his own transformation. His volunteer work at the Literacy Center had grown into something unexpected. He wasn't just tutoring anymore, he was listening. Immigrants told him stories of being dismissed, laughed at, or ignored in banks. Their frustration reminded him of the exact arrogance he once embodied. One evening, an older man named Hassan looked at Webb directly. "You once worked in a bank?" "Oh, yes." "Did you ever treat people like me this way?" Webb's throat tightened. For the first time, he didn't reach for excuses. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I did, and I regret it." Hassan studied him for a moment, then simply said, "Good. Now teach others not to." That night, Webb scribbled furiously in his notebook. It wasn't self-pity anymore, it was clarity. He began shaping his reflections into a structured essay, part confession, part guide. He titled it, "What I Didn't See." Lisa Chen was also rebuilding her path. She had completed her probation and been promoted to assistant regional manager. But her growth was less about titles and more about courage. She now hosted small workshops for employees where they practiced catching their own assumptions. In one session, she asked, "How many of you have ever assumed something about a customer based on how they looked before you even said hello?" Nearly every hand rose. The laughter that followed wasn't mocking, it was liberating. People were admitting what had once been taboo. Maria Gonzalez praised her afterward. "Lisa, you've turned your weakness into wisdom." That's real leadership. Lisa smiled, though a part of her still carried guilt from the day she had stood by Webb. But she was learning to transform guilt into fuel. Rodriguez's role expanded too. Headquarters formally adopted his training program for all new hires. He stood in front of classrooms of security officers, his voice steady, his honesty cutting through like a blade. "You're here to keep order," he said, "but never mistake order for justice. Sometimes following the rules blindly means breaking trust. Your real job is to keep everyone safe, including from prejudice." One young recruit raised her hand. "What if my supervisor orders me to remove someone unfairly?" Rodriguez didn't hesitate. "Then you refuse, because one day you might be removing the very person who built the walls around you." The recruits sat in silence, the lesson sinking deep. Meanwhile, Amelia's influence extended far beyond the bank's walls. At community centers, churches, and universities, people discussed the case of the CEO kicked out of her own bank. Activists used her story as a rallying cry. Professors taught it as a case study in leadership. High school students wrote essays about resilience, quoting her congressional testimony. Yet Amelia remained cautious. At dinner with Evelyn Carter one evening, she confessed, "Sometimes I wonder if the story has grown bigger than the truth. They call me a hero, but I'm just a woman who refused to be humiliated." Evelyn leaned across the table. "That's exactly why it resonates. You're not untouchable. You're human. People see themselves in you. And that's power." The redemption arc wasn't Amelia's alone. One afternoon, Sarah Martinez, the activist live streamer whose video had first gone viral, hosted a panel discussion about discrimination in finance. The event was streamed to thousands online. To everyone's surprise, she invited Marcus Webb. The chat section exploded with outrage. "Why give him a platform? This man doesn't deserve redemption." Sarah opened the session by addressing the skepticism. "Redemption doesn't erase harm. But if we don't let people change, then what's the point of fighting for change at all?" Webb spoke haltingly, his voice rough with nerves. He didn't defend himself. He didn't blame circumstances. He simply read portions of what I didn't see. He admitted his arrogance, his blind spots, his regret. When he finished, the room was silent. Then one viewer commented, "This is uncomfortable, but maybe that's the point." The clip spread quickly. Some mocked him still, but others admitted that hearing his humility made them reconsider how change actually happens. Amelia watched the recording later in her office. For a moment, she simply sat still, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, "Maybe he's finally learning." By late summer, Metropolitan Trust launched a new initiative, a $25 million community fund for minority-owned startups. The announcement drew applause and headlines. But Amelia knew the true victory wasn't in numbers, it was in the cultural shift. She visited a small bakery in Queens that had received one of the first grants. The owner, a young Dominican woman named Elena, greeted her with flour-dusted hands. "Dr. Richardson," she said, eyes shining, "this bakery exists because you gave us a chance." Amelia smiled. "No, it exists because you worked for it. We just stopped standing in your way." Moments like these carried her through sleepless nights and political storms. They reminded her why she had chosen not just to fight, but to rebuild. The city began to see Metropolitan Trust not just as a bank, but as a symbol. Customers walked into branches expecting fairness. Employees wore badges that read, "Respect for all." The narrative had shifted from scandal to standard. And for Webb, for Lisa, for Rodriguez, for countless others, the story was no longer about a single humiliating incident. It was about what came after, about growth, reckoning, and the possibility of redemption. By autumn, what began as a humiliating confrontation in a single bank lobby had grown into a storm shaking the entire American financial industry. The Amelia Protocol was no longer just a policy inside Metropolitan Trust. It had become a benchmark, a standard against which every other institution was measured. Regulators cited it, academics dissected it, customers demanded it. But with influence came resistance. At an industry conference in Washington, D.C., the tension was palpable. CEOs, lawmakers, journalists, and activists crowded into a massive ballroom. The Financial Association of America had called the gathering to address what they called the future of banking culture. Everyone knew it was really about Amelia. She walked onto the stage in her signature navy suit, calm and poised, but her heart beat harder than she let anyone see. The audience buzzed with whispers, some admiring, some skeptical, some hostile. Across the stage sat rival bank CEOs and, at the far end, Congressman Mark Halstead, his smirk already in place. The moderator, a polished television anchor, leaned into the microphone. Tonight, we will debate the merits of the Amelia Protocol and whether systemic anti-bias measures belong in American banking. Halstead went first, his voice booming. Ladies and gentlemen, let's call this what it is, social engineering disguised as business reform. Banks are not political laboratories. They are financial institutions. Dr. Richardson's so-called protocol is a distraction, a burden, and a threat to efficiency. The room rumbled with applause from his allies. Cameras flashed. Then Amelia rose. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam the table. She simply spoke with the steadiness of someone who had lived the truth she described. Congressman, she said evenly, with all due respect, efficiency without humanity is not banking. It is exploitation. Trust is the currency of our industry. If a customer walks into a branch and feels judged before they speak, you've already lost the account, no matter how fast your transactions are. Her words quieted the room. One rival CEO, William Patterson of National Federal Bank, leaned forward, his tone sharp. But Amelia, your reforms are expensive. Bias detection software, expanded training, community funds. It's a massive financial commitment. How do you justify that to shareholders? Amelia's reply was simple. I don't justify it as a cost. I prove it as an investment. Metropolitan Trust's customer growth, retention, and market share are not speculation. They're results. Shareholders haven't lost money. They've gained it. The moderator turned to the audience for questions. A young black woman in the crowd stood, her voice trembling but strong. I closed my account with National Federal last month because they treated me like I didn't belong. I opened one with Metropolitan Trust. For the first time, I felt seen. That's why this matters. The ballroom shifted. The testimony wasn't theoretical. It was human. Halstead tried to retake the ground. Anecdotes don't build economies. Policies do. If every bank is forced to adopt these rules, compliance costs will strangle growth. Amelia countered. The cost of bias has already strangled growth for millions of Americans who never got fair loans, who were denied accounts, who were humiliated until they stopped trusting institutions altogether. Tell me, Congressman, how much has that cost our economy? Applause thundered. Even some rival CEOs hesitated. At that moment, Marcus Webb sat in the back row, almost invisible. He had no badge of authority, no position of power, but he had come to watch, to face the woman whose dignity had destroyed and rebuilt his life. He listened as Amelia dismantled the excuses he once believed, and though shame still burned inside him. For the first time he felt gratitude that her strength had forced him to confront himself. Meanwhile, Lisa Chen watched the broadcast from a training room at headquarters, surrounded by junior managers. She paused the screen. Did you hear what she said? Trust is the currency. Remember that. It's not just a slogan. It's our North Star. Rodriguez, too, streamed the event for a group of security recruits. When the audience applauded Amelia's words, he turned to his class and said, "That's leadership, not shouting, not blaming, leading by example." Back on stage, the debate reached its climax. Halstead grew red-faced, accusing Amelia of turning banks into therapy sessions. She stayed calm, her composure sharpening every contrast between them. Finally, the moderator asked a closing question. "Dr. Richardson, what do you say to critics who argue that you are politicizing business?" Amelia took a slow breath, scanning the room. She thought of the night she almost broke down in the restroom, of Evelyn's quiet wisdom, of Lisa's growing courage, of Rodriguez's honesty, of Webb's shaky essay. She thought of the bakery owner in Queens who had said, "We just needed a chance." Then she spoke. "If fairness is political, then so be it. If dignity is controversial, then we have lost our way. I was humiliated in my own bank because of bias. I turned that humiliation into reform, and I will not apologize for asking this industry to do better, because we can, because we must." The room erupted. Some cheered, others jeered. Cameras flashed like lightning. The debate ended, but the conversation was only beginning. That night, headlines exploded. Richardson confronts industry. Head on. CEO versus Congress who won the banking debate. Clips of Amelia's calm rebuttals went viral, especially the line, "Trust is the currency of our industry." In her hotel room afterward, Amelia sat in silence, the adrenaline slowly fading. Evelyn called, her voice warm. "You know what you did tonight? You didn't just defend a policy. You defended people." Amelia smiled faintly. Let's hope they heard it. But deep inside, she knew they had. The tremors were now quakes. The industry could no longer pretend this was a passing moment. Change was here, and her words were chiseling it into stone. At its heart, this story is not only about banking, it is about life, dignity, and the choices we face when confronted with injustice. Amelia's experience teaches us that discrimination does not always wear a loud face. Often, it hides in ordinary interactions, in the small ways people are dismissed or overlooked. But her response shows us something deeper. Strength is not only in resisting anger, but in channeling it into meaningful change. For older generations, this lesson resonates even more. Many have lived through times when bias was simply endured in silence. Amelia reminds us that silence is not the only answer. Change is possible, even late in life, when we choose to confront wrongs with courage and calm conviction. Her journey also tells us that redemption exists for those who err and for those who suffer. Mistakes can be acknowledged, lessons can be shared, and broken trust can be rebuilt. In daily life, we may not all own banks or stand before Congress, but we each hold the power to choose to treat others with respect, to pause before judging, and to leave behind a legacy of fairness. That is Amelia's gift to us all. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with us. Stories like this matter because they remind us of our shared humanity and the respect every person deserves. If this touched you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that inspire, challenge, and heal. See you in the next video.